Welcome to the Inner Space Project podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Inner Space Project podcast. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley. I'm your host, and I'm excited to introduce my guest to you today, who's going to speak to us around things related to the middle of life. Those of you who've been watching the podcast know that I've divided the segments into beginnings, middles, endings, and liminal space. And beginnings being early first 18 years, middles being life in general and how we do that wild ride, and endings being around grief, transition, and loss, and liminal space is the places in between. So today I have an amazing advocate and coach for people who are wanting to create change and navigate transition, but are struggling with mental patterns that undermine their progress. He focuses on helping people practice and apply simple, practical strategies to work more effectively with both their mind and their body. His work also emphasizes identifying values and creating an action plan that align actions with those values. His motto is do more important stuff with less mental noise. Welcome, Patrick Wilson.
Great to be here, Patti. Thank you.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. And aside from that formal introduction, I just want to say that we've known each other now for, it was 2011 when I came back to Colorado. And so 14 years, going on 15 years. And we were colleagues for a while. And it was great to work with you. And as we both branched out into our own practices, to stay in touch and just really value your work. And we had lunch last week and had a conversation about inner space. And it was like we're just so intersected in our work, where you're going with your practice that you're building and where I'm going with the Inner Space Project. So I'm so happy to have you here today. And yeah. And so talk a little bit about your practice is called Balanced Mind Coaching. Just tell us about you and that work. Big question.
So there's always a parallel between the work I'm doing and sort of the coaching that I'm offering. I'm sure it's true for everyone in the helping profession. We're on our own journey as we're working with our clients to move forward in their own lives. And such a big part of my journey, and especially I would say the last, 2 to 5 years, was really about me trying to figure out how to work more effectively with my mind. I have a lot of history of overthinking things and having a lot of doubt and insecurity, and my mind was not my friend. And so I think a lot of this was in working with clients, but also in working with myself, realizing that at least in our culture at this time, there is such a propensity to being in the mind and trying to figure things out and trying to predict things and trying to organize things uh, and trying to control things. And this pattern just creates so much tension inside of me, and I saw the same pattern in my clients. And so for me, balancing mind is being able to center myself and be connected with my own self, be connected with the present moment. And in doing so, and when I'm in that space, then I can actually use my mind in a helpful way rather than kind of going to the mind in this unhelpful way that creates dissociation and so many patterns of just anxiety and just being up in my head. So for me, balance mind coaching was really about how to really practically work with people to stay centered, to stay connected to themselves, and then to use the mind when it's helpful to use the mind to create, to research, to learn. There are great things about the mind, but if the mind is sort of our go-to strategy for every, fear and doubt that arises, we end up digging ourselves a lot of holes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we kind of are taught that early on is that left brain idea of, fix it in our mental ideas or constructs are going to fix it. But, like I said in my TED talk, you can't do this from the neck up. You can't find safety in the logical mind. And so what does it mean then we're connecting to the heart, right?
The heart, the gut, the breath, our five senses, anything that's connected back to the present moment. It's all connected. But if we're not connected to the present moment, if we're not connected to our bodies, then we're not here.
Right, right. And I love all the work like Heart Math is done in California, with the research around regulating the heart rate and how that heart is actually the regulatory organ, not the brain. And so we have a lot to learn about that because don't we kind of want to jump up into our heads? I used to say to a client years ago, drop down, drop down. This is before I, knew what I was doing or had all this research, but I just intuitively said, drop down, because she was just, and I have a
Yeah,
lot of my clients do that. And we all do it, right? Is like that monkey mind.
totally. Come back to your senses.
Come back to your senses. Yeah, literally, what are you feeling? And that's the hard part, right? Is like
Right.
we don't want to feel the hard stuff. So how would you define mental health then? If we're gonna let's just jump into a big question. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's interesting to reflect on that. Because for me, the definition has almost this sense of distancing from the mind, mental health.
Mm,
And for me, it's really less about the mind and the health of the mind. It's really more about connection with ourselves, with the present moment, with our bodies. And so it's almost ironic. Like mental health for me is really about like, well, how connected are you? How connected am I to this present moment, to my body, to what's actually happening right now? And I think the more connected I am to myself, the more connected, the more present I am, the more I would have the sense of oh, I feel mentally healthy, as defined probably by the larger society. So for me, it's about less mind and more connection, more body, more present moment awareness.
And don't you think even the word itself kind of takes us over into the stigma of mental illness, which to me is very different from mental health? And I agree, it's not our mental health as much as it's our wholehearted wellness, as Brene Brown would say, the word wholeheartedness,
Yeah.
all feelings are okay, all behavior isn't, how do we regulate those feelings and feel a sense of wholeness? But people think of mental health, mental illness. Oh my God, we'll put you over here in the anxiety, depression category. And that's pretty scary. We don't want to go there. Right. And that again
Yeah.
is the reason why I wanted to start this inner space project because I felt that so much in my work from
Yeah.
hearing people's stories, personally and professionally.
Totally.
Just like,
Totally.
want to talk about that one.
Right.
That we just don't talk about that. We're all raised in those. I can't say all. That's a broad statement, but most or many, if not most of us, were raised in families where we couldn't talk about this stuff because honestly, we
Totally.
didn't know it. Right?
Right.
This is all
Yeah.
brand new. I always say it's hot off the press, even though that's an old statement because there's no presses anymore.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because whatever terminology we're using, it could be mental health, mental illness, or it could even be a specific diagnostic, kind of category. Um, so let's say mental illness, or let's say anxiety or depression. It's like we think we know what that is, but the reality of it is each one of us experiences that in a very different way. And so really it's the label doesn't help us at all. It's like in the moment to moment experience, it's like if I'm experiencing depression, it's like, oh, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What's the pattern of that in my own body, in my own experience? today, because it's going to be different today than it was yesterday, and it's going to be different today than it is tomorrow. And so a lot of times we'll throw out these terms like mental illness or mental health or depression or anxiety, and it's like we think we have something, but really we don't, because it's just a label. There's not a lot of information there.
And it's shaming. I mean, that's been my work researching
Right.
shame. It's shaming.
Yeah.
Oh, I have that, or I am that,
Right.
as
Right.
opposed to what's this experience that I'm exploring inside myself with no judgment. Wow, what a concept, which is what I want the Inner Space Project to be.
Yeah.
And again, why you and I thought there was such an overlap. So, how do you see balancing mind related to exploring inner space then? Um,
Yeah. For me, I love the idea of inner space. Um, just because like I think we're so fascinated with the world around us, and we're so fascinated about like going somewhere, like, oh, we're going to go to Mars, or we're going to go to the moon, or whatever. And it's like we're so adept at wanting to go out and find answers. And there's this idea of what if the inner space is as rich and dynamic and diverse as the outer space? And I think it is. It might even be more dynamic and rich.
yeah.
Um, but there's this idea of like really attuning to that and going in there and exploring. And I think that's what your work is all about, is like how can we be, not astronauts, but like the equivalent of explorers in our own inner world. um but anyways, get to back to your question. It feels like when I look at my own life, the times that I've been able to go into this inner space and to be connected with myself is are times where I've been able to create some separation from mind and quiet the mind and actually be more present. And so I think this idea of balancing mind, this idea of presence and connection with self, almost opens the gateway to exploring this, inner space. Without it, I think we can be in our minds, and I think the minds are part of inner space. I mean, it's our own personal um, space, so it's part of inner space. But it feels like sometimes we get so distracted by the stories and the conditioning in our own minds that we're not really present to be exploring what's actually going on inside of ourselves. So it feels like until we can have some healthy relationship with our minds, it's really hard to do that exploring.
Right. And when you were talking about, people are looking out into outer space or whatever, even, outside of ourselves on the planet, like where's the next best thing? We were talking about, all the therapeutic approaches that are, trendy, like, or seem to be the all solution. People are going to get, this because it's new and this person out here is going to help me, as opposed to, what can I do inside me? And I think when I compare that to outer space, it being this dark place with no gravity and just this big unknown, and how frightening that can be. What about how frightening that is to go into this big unknown in here, and how
Yeah.
much courage that takes? And I think that's why we're out there looking for, where's the next best person
Sure.
or thing that's going to take this pain away, instead of what if I go into the pain and
Yeah.
I'm not
Or
massive
the joy. It
or
isn't
the
always it isn't always, painful, right?
Exactly. And and I've that's what I've learned in my work around grief. And the deeper we feel grief, the deeper we can actually experience love and joy.
Totally. Totally.
They you can't just have the joy and not the sadness, anyway.
Totally.
But it's terrifying for a lot of people, which again is why I want to demystify it in the Inner Space Project. And
Totally.
yeah, how do we balance that out,
Right.
find that present moment and be non-judgmental.
Totally. There's so much conditioning, cultural conditioning about going into the inner space and it being scary and dangerous and uncomfortable. And I think I mean it's just so much of our enculturation in this culture. It's like don't go there. And I think there are other cultures that are like, no, that's where the rich stuff is. Or there's a nice balance of, hey, go inward, but also go outward. Like you're in this world and you need to be of service and you need to, explore and understand the world around you. But you also have to go into the inner world to get all the good stuff, like all the insight and the wisdom. I think is so much. That's the fountain of where all that information originates.
So, question, and that just popped in. So, this is kind of on the fly question for you. What, so how do you help people have the courage to do what you just described, to enter into? It's almost like getting in that spaceship, but you're going in instead of out, and a lot of
Yeah,
people are like, no, I'm not going there.
right.
What do you think is helpful to encourage people to understand that it could be enlightening to go into the inner space?
Yeah. Um, I think one thing that's really helpful is not to create a story about what we're doing. If we're
Mm.
like, oh, we're going into the inner space, it's like, oh my God. Ugh. So I think the way that I work with people is first off to be curious, and secondly is to really try to use this capacity that we each have to just observe and not label, and not sort of attach, but just like notice, like, hey, what's going on? And I don't think like one thing, because I'm not a therapist, I'm not always like sort of going to how does that feel, or what are you noticing there as far as feeling. I think feelings are really important, but oftentimes I'll just go to sensation
Mm.
or tightness or just different things that we can notice in our body. And it's not so much like it feels like a very gentle way of coming into the inner space. Is like, hey, what are you noticing? What are you noticing about your breath right now? What are you noticing about sort of your stature or the way you're holding your body? And so I think it's just about inviting awareness and starting to self-reflect, like, hey, what's going on inside this physical form right now? And I think it's sort of like dipping your toe into the water. You just start observing, and then as you're observing, you notice other things, and it sort of organically opens up.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, I think I'm always starting with the five senses. Like, what are you noticing, and what are you aware of in this moment?
Reminds me of two things that I actually teach in my trainings on shame. And one of them is John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness, which is moment to moment non-judgmental awareness. And that feels like what you're describing,
Right.
our pioneer, John Kabat-Zinn, in the whole mindfulness piece. And when you think
Totally.
about that, how hard is that for people to live in the moment without judgment?
It's very hard,
Mm.
especially in our culture right now, because
Right.
we're so used to organizing, categorizing, labeling, judging, weighing out, assessing, analyzing. It's like our whole culture is pulling us in that direction.
Right. Which, if I judge you about something, then I don't have to look at what I'm feeling in my inner space. Basically, it's a defense. It's a distraction, a deflection.
Right.
And the other
Right.
thing I thought of was Carl Rogers. Person centered therapy. His just seeing that person as this own self and without any judgment. I love his work too. To
Yeah.
sense. I think that one of the quotes I use is to sense another person's experience without being pulled into it or judging it, or so. I'm not doing the
Mhm.
justice
Mhm.
to the quote, but that's what I'm hearing you say in answer to the
Yeah.
question of how you help people is by being that non-judgmental presence and helping them. Oh, it is like an exhale, right? Like, ah.
Well, it's like being with someone, like whatever they're experiencing, you
Mhm,
know. And I think that's such a gift. I think that to find another human being that'll just be with you
mhm,
wherever you're at
mhm.
without judgment, and just like, hey, well, let's walk this, let's be pilgrims walking this path together for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I
And
think there's so much therapeutic benefit just from holding space in that way.
empathy, they say, research has shown empathy is the most important factor in good therapy, and I would imagine in coaching as well, but most people, there's another thing I do in my training is, teach about large empathy. Like, what does it mean to sit in somebody's trauma with them and,
Mhm.
and, and walk and co-regulate with them through that.
Totally.
And
Totally.
it's not something we've learned. I know the story I always think about is, when my father died when I was a kid, people felt sorry for me, but I didn't get a lot of empathy. Like, oh, can we talk about this? How is this for you? It's like, poor Patty, we don't want to talk about it. It's like
Yeah.
sympathy
Yeah.
is like, we'll put it over here as opposed to,
Yeah.
and the real healing is just what you said, is being with a person and having that empathy.
Totally.
And it requires
Yeah.
skills, I
It
think.
does. Well, it requires practice. Like you say, we have to be familiar enough with our own pain and regulating our own self in our own pain that we can show up for someone who's experiencing pain and not react to that, but actually continue to breathe and be there with them.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It
Um,
was when I listened to your first podcast and you were sharing the story about descending the stairs when your mother called you down after your father's death. It felt like such a rich opportunity to connect with you as this young woman and to be in the space of your father and somehow like create some sort of meaning for you in that moment, but there wasn't the capacity on whoever was around you, your mother or the police officer or whatever, but there was no capacity to be with you. And so I think that compounded the confusion for you. It's like, this is weird. It's like, okay, everybody's telling me they're weird just through their body language. This
yeah,
is fucking weird, but it's, oh, excuse me.
that's fine. I think that's okay. It's true. It's a
Yeah,
great way to describe it. It was fucking weird. So yeah, and then I did my podcast, my last endings, where I just told the story because it was the 55th anniversary, and it was really vulnerable for me. And I thought, oh, this is too much for people to put all that out there. But I just felt like it was interesting that the time of the podcast for the endings fell on that day, and I just felt like I need to do it. So a really good friend of mine, we had dinner afterwards, and she said, you know what? I just wondered, why didn't your mother go upstairs and talk to you before she told you to come downstairs? And I thought,
yeah,
I never thought of that part either. That's very true.
right.
So yeah, I mean, and again, that's why I do this podcast. So not that I want to go back to the story of my father dying, other than it
Totally.
really is the reason behind my work. It's the wind, what is it, the wind behind my wings or beneath my wings, because that was a big deal. And I'm just the kind of person, I think we all have an essence that we're born into the world with. And I'm just the kind of person that's
Totally.
like, I'm just not going to like put that aside and say, oh, well, it's no big deal. It was a big deal. And so I feel like that's what I want to do with the Inner Space Project, is give people a space to talk about these things without, you know, it's like the old school beliefs, like you said, don't talk about it. Just like it doesn't exist or something if we don't talk about it. I don't anyway. So, well, let's see. What else? Patrick Wilson, would you like to talk about? I have a question here
I,
about.
I had a reflection earlier today as I was, sort of reflecting on this. And maybe it's even a question for you, but like, I actually love this idea of there's this boundary. I think of like a cell membrane. There's like this sort of semi-permeable boundary between inner space and outer space. And I
Mm,
was trying to define in my own mind or like even feel into like, ooh, what is that boundary between inner and outer space? And what's important about that boundary? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Man, I'd like to hear you say more about that from your perspective, because it's an interesting image to pull up.
Yeah. Well, I think of I feel like we're inhabiting these bodies, right? Like
Mhm.
there's there's this idea that there's sort of a soul or a spirit inside of these bodies, and so like there's this kind of spiritual element to the inner space. There's a sacred kind of element to the inner space, and it seems like the interplay between inner space and outer space is really sort of through our senses, right? So we can see and hear, and we have tactile sensation. And there is this interplay between inner and outer space. Like as we move through life and as we um, connect with people or we connect with experiences, there's like this push pull that's happening along that membrane. And I think of presence. Presence exists like at that boundary between inner space and outer space. It's like if we're really present, like we're right at that boundary, like our attention is right at that boundary. So I don't know. I'm just playing around with that this morning of sort of this boundary, and like it's kind of a cool boundary. I hadn't really thought of it in that way before.
Yeah. Well, I think what comes up for me is the both and. Like,
Mhm.
yes, I agree. It is a spiritual experience, our heart and our inner self. And I think, like my mentor, Catherine Kersey, used to say, children come into the world very much like a packet of seeds with no cover on the front. And it's our job as a parent to raise that seed to its highest potential, not to try and raise a rose into a carnation or a carnation into a rose. So I think that you probably heard that before. I've said that a lot. So we're born with an essence. I have 4 children grown now, and they're all different in the
Totally.
expression on their face when they were born to who they are now in their 30s and 40s. And I see it. There's a thread of something in all of us. And we're all
Mhm.
different, like snowflakes, right? So
Uh-huh.
we're all one, we're all connected. So in the spiritual idea of inner space, there is no boundary. It's all one. However, we live in a human body
Right.
where we have a boundary of some sort, and we need a boundary because we can't
Mhm.
just float around and you know be completely tossed around by everybody else's
Yeah.
essences. We have to have some sort of boundary that holds that inner space in a sacred way. And I think, again, it's the both and. I think, don't you think that sometimes, we live in Boulder, Colorado, where there's a lot of spiritual bypassing?
Yeah.
We don't feel anger, we don't feel this, it's all, it's spiritual practice to know that we're all one and we're all okay and everything's great. And then there's this, gut wrenching experience of the world we're living in, especially today.
Mhm.
It's a little heavy right now, what we're
Totally.
navigating.
Yeah.
And so it's not one or the other. So that's the
I
sense
agree.
that I get, is that it's a container that holds that sacred space that we need. I don't know. I like
Yeah.
the idea of exploring um, that and what that means to you. So,
Yeah. Cool.
so presence and emotional literacy and agency. Um, I feel like the whole idea of emotional literacy is, again, a big motivation for the Inner Space Project, because and you and I, when we had lunch the other day, I think that's kind of what you said was, what I've noticed is that a lot of people aren't aware of any of this stuff. And I said, yeah, that's why I'm doing the Inner Space Project, because we never really learned it, right? It's just so
Right.
brand new. um so presence and emotional literacy and agency for you is what?
I'm not sure what I know what emotional literacy means. Um, I think I do. I think it has to do with sort of being able to identify emotional patterns and sort of like point to them. Um, I think that I mean certainly that's helpful. Like you're going into inner space. It's like it's part of like pulling that all apart and sort of understanding what is in this inner space. Um, it also feels like sometimes when we're actually able to be present in our inner space and in our experience, that that a lot of our experience actually transcends sort of literary boundaries or literary structure, um, as far as emotions, because you can have two or three emotions happening at the same time, and that's like, oh, that's a whole nother color or a whole nother flavor,
Yeah.
and so maybe sometimes like I think this is kind of referring back to what I was talking about earlier, is like we have so many mental constructs around sort of our inner world. And I think they're useful tools, they're helpful tools, but sometimes it feels like the thing to do is like to just be connected to ourselves and connected to our experience, and not try to label it and not try to figure out like, oh, what is that? Is that this or is that that?
Yeah.
And just be with the experience and be with the transformation of the experience, because the inner experience is alive. It's constantly forming and reforming in different ways. And so it's like just being with being with this flowing water, and just drifting along and enjoying it, or feeling fear and apprehension, whatever's coming up, but just trying to be present and to be with it.
Yeah.
I think I may have totally avoided your question. I apologize.
No, I think you're making a good point that really, and this is what I say in my shame training too, is we're talking about something that's nonverbal. I'm doing a 2-day training for therapists on an a concept that has no language, basically. And that's what you're saying is there's really no language to the essence of what is happening. However, again, back to the cell membrane idea. Um, we live in a world where we have experiences, and I think historically we haven't learned what our feelings are. We don't have a name for them. When I was studying with my mentor in Virginia, my kids were little toddlers. It was kind of like a lab school in my home, where we had to practice using I statements. So I would do it with my children. When you run on the sidewalk, I'm afraid you're going to fall down. My kids would say, Mom, you sure scared a lot. you know, and but then I also had my oldest daughter's friend, message me years ago and say, I learned so much about my emotions from being hanging out in your house. And I was like, wow, the fringe benefit of me practicing everything I was learning with my children actually impacted their friends, because she lived in a very punitive home. I mean, boy, it was like she was restricted all the time, man. She was like on lockdown for everything and just yelled at. And we're in my family, I was learning all these other tools of parenting that most of us don't really know yet. I mean, it's a big, very beginning of that exploration. So, to get what I mean by emotional literacy is to give it a word, and so
Yeah.
bring it into the demystify. Like I do what I call the excavation exercise with my clients, where and just take an I statement and I flipped it around from a dialogue for nonviolent communication and made it a dialogue in inner space with self. Hey, this experience just happened and here's what I'm feeling. And so you look at the feeling word list and I'm either, like Brene Brown says, most of in her research, people would say angry, sad, or pissed, right? And so we know that we're those things. We got that. But what else is there? There's betrayal, there's abandonment, there's um gaslighted, disillusioned, unloved, unworthy. And so when we get to, and the people will look at the list and go, oh, that's what it is.
Mhm.
Oh, and then I always say, well,
Yeah.
let's think about a time when that happened when you were really little.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how did this story get set up? So that's what I mean by emotional literacy. Some people call it emotional intelligence. Some people call it
Yeah.
whatever. But I feel like you're right. It's nonverbal. There are no words. And I think allowing ourselves to be with that as well, instead of going too much into the head with, oh, here's the cognitive, idea. I'm feeling this and therefore it means that. So no, I'm feeling that. And what is that like in my body? And how has that shown up for me before? And what is the layer of awareness that I can open up and bring that back to that moment to moment non-judgmental awareness too. And it's like
Yeah.
so liberating for people when I see that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I also like emotional literacy in the form of, oh, I think I'm going to barf right now.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
that's a real thing, right? I feel sick. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I feel like,
Yeah. It's
why
like
is that,
that.
is that
That's
how you're
like,
feeling
that's a,
now, Patrick?
that's a very somatic experience. Like, oh, I feel it's like, okay, I know what that is. And that is not a label, but I know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that how you feel talking to me? You want to vomit?
No, I'm excited. This is delightful. But that was just the image that came up. Is like, oh, I want to barf right now. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a poignant example.
Right. And we work with that, right? I mean, that's a really,
Right.
really very a somatic experience,
Right.
and that happens a lot with
Totally.
trauma.
Right.
Okay, wow, I just loved our conversation. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about your work particularly. And I know in the past your work was a lot around empowering men, and young men, and helping them find a sense of self. And I think this balanced mind is actually integrating both parts, not just really about gender, right? But
Totally. Yeah. I think it felt like I love working with men, with young men, and it didn't feel like I was moving away from that. It was more like I really want to work on this conceptually and somatically, working with this idea of how can we have a healthier relationship with both our mind and our body, and in doing so, allow us more freedom and more confidence to do the stuff that we want to do in this world. As I mean, I'm a coach. I'm really trying to connect people with, hey, what do you want to create and what do you want to change in your life? And I think at the root of it is like finding more effective ways for us to work with both our mind and body. So it's not like I don't want to work with men anymore. It's more like I really want to work with this dynamic of the mind and the body, and helping people connect all that to move forward in important and powerful ways in their own life.
mhm. And for me, it's not about gender, because I've spent a lot of years exploring the feminine, the divine feminine, and what that means.
So,
And and then the masculine. So we have the healthy masculine, feminine, wounded masculine, feminine, and we see a lot of that in both genders. I don't think it really is about
totally.
gender. And again, it's about balance and what is a healthy feminine and a healthy masculine. Again, I think those are things that we haven't really explored because life has been so much about survival, and lifespans were shorter. We didn't have the global awareness that we have. And so, again, what's going on inside of us
Yeah.
is so unknown. And I think that's that wholehearted experience of both masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
I know one of the things you said to me the last time we had lunch, when we were talking about our work and how I'm trying to kind of continue. I'm always working with my brand and trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing with
Totally.
this work. And you said, just, go, what did you say? Go with your heart, trust your heart.
Well, I think you were talking about like some very technical training that you were working on, and it didn't feel like that was alive in you. Like you knew that information was important, but really it's like, well, how do you want to present this information? It's like, well, present it from your heart. Like that's where the passion and the excitement for whatever you're training, that's where all that exists. So it's like be there. And I don't know. I guess that was my attempt to try to encourage you.
And I appreciate that because it's been in the back of my mind since you said that. And what does that mean? And not that that's a new idea for me, because again, exploring the feminine to me is all about heart. There's also this element of needing the masculine container back to the membrane, what's holding the space. I years ago heard somebody say the feminine is the river and the masculine is the riverbank. We need both. One can't exist without the other, or water can't exist without some sort of container.
Yeah.
So I tend to kind of vacillate into this world of logical thinking and left brain analysis and want to figure it all out. And so it was a really good reminder to go, okay, breathe. And what does my heart say? So I appreciate that. I think that's really the key. And that's what we're talking about here. And we all need
Yeah.
that reminder. So I appreciated that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, this has been a heartful discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much, Patrick. I think because I usually ask my guests 3 questions at the end about inner space, I think we kind of covered them. What are your thoughts about inner space, mental health awareness, tools or tips? You kind of mentioned so what is your, here we go. What's a tool or a tip that you want to throw out at the end here?
A tool or a tip for navigation of inner space. Hmm. Slow down and take a moment to just notice. Just notice what's going on without trying to label or judge or make sense of it, is just be in the mystery of whatever's happening within the context of your life experience in a given moment.
I love that. I try in the morning to do a lot of mindfulness practice, and some days better than others. And this morning I actually sat down very intentionally and connected to my guides and said, what do I need to do? And that was the message I got, was slow down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we don't think that, right? It's like is it a juxtaposition? Is that what it is? We live in this, kind of hurry up and get it done, problem solve world. What if we slowed down? What might happen? You know,
Well,
ah,
you think about going out into the desert for 40 days, that's where you do this work, is you go into the cave, you
yeah,
go into the dark of winter,
yeah,
maybe you go into the darkness of depression, but you have to slow down enough
yeah.
to not be distracted by everything outside, so that you can actually drop into the inner world and do your inner space exploration.
Mm, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time. We'll have your website on the podcast, so people can get in touch with you. Is there anything else you want any people to know about you and your work, and or anything else that you want to just?
No, I think this has been a great conversation, and I appreciate you inviting me on and giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about my perspective and my philosophy and my approach to coaching. So thank you, Patty.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you, Patrick. I have a lot of respect for you and your work. And it just such a gift to have your time and your insights. And we'll talk more about that membrane and all of that as as we
I love that.
explore inner space further.
I love it. Yeah, that sounds great, Patty. Thank
All
you.
right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Welcome to the Inner Space Project podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Do you Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this inner space journey, and we'll come back again for the upcoming episodes. For more information about the Inner Space Project and all the other offerings I have for you, please visit my website, www.pattiashley.com, PATTIASHLEY. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.